Hi guys, and welcome to the podcast. I am, of course, your host and podcast founder, Lawrence Francis. I just want to take this opportunity to give you a quick overview of this series, which features coverage of the Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival, which took place at Iveagh Gardens in central Dublin between the 8th and the 11th of August 2019, which will air on the Interpreting Wine podcast between episodes 289 and episode 300. This will feature a mixture of talks and one-to-one interviews with some of the leading lights in the Irish and international wine scene. This consumer fair is now in its second year, and I was seriously impressed with the quality of speaker overall. I think that events of this type really lend themselves well to being covered for the podcast, and would love to feature more events of this kind in the future. So without further ado, here is today's episode of the Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival 2019 series. Today's episode of the podcast marks the end of this Dublin Wine and Cheese Festival takeover. But we're going out in style as we feature John Wilson, Irish Times wine, beer and spirits scribe, talking all about chilled reds. Enjoy.
The title of this talk is actually WTF Chilled Red Wines, which is exactly what a friend of mine said when I handed him a glass of cold red wine. He then went into a tirade about how I was becoming a pretentious wine git and handing out chilled glasses of red wine with, he said, next you'll be putting ice into it. And he may have had a point about me being a pretentious git, but about the wine and the temperature, I don't think he did, because in Dublin here, or in Ireland, we have this thing that red wine must be served warm. And I have huge rows with restaurants when I go in, because they keep wine at what they call room temperature. And if you look at all the wine books, they'll say a wine should be chambray, which means at room temperature. What they don't actually tell you is that it's Victorian room temperature, before the advent of central heating or any other easy heating systems. So actually the wine was probably quite cool, was probably about 16 to 18 degrees, which is quite cool for a red wine. Why would you bother doing it? Well, actually, as people who buy wine and serve it, the easiest way to manipulate a wine to make it look good or to make it look really bad is the temperature you serve it at. So if you, when you've left here and tasted my fantastic wines, go over and try a glass of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, warm it up to room temperature, it'll be disgusting, it'll be awful, because part of the thrill of New Zealand Sauvignon is that crisp acidity, the chilled feeling you get in your mouth. It heightens the aromas, it heightens the acidity. With red wine, at the polar opposite, it's completely different. With big red wines, you do serve them quite warm, and quite warm means about 18 degrees. So if you've a big Chateauneuf du Pape or a very tannic Bordeaux, and the tannins, the cooler you serve them, the more mouth puckering they get, you should serve that at quite a warm temperature. But in between that, there are sort of wines that are neither red nor white. And there's a white wine, Chardonnay from Burgundy, which actually is a white wine trying to be red, because it's rich, it hasn't got too much acidity, it hasn't got too much tannin. So if you serve it at about 10, 12 degrees, it tastes perfect. And then we come to the chilled reds, and we're going to taste three of them, one of them at two different temperatures this evening. And these are red wines that are low in alcohol, light in fruit, they've lovely aromas to them, but they're quite high in acidity. So they're refreshing, they're the sort of wines, the French call them either gouléant, which means gluggy, or just glou-glou wines, which basically means wines that you sit down and drink lots of without talking too much about or listening to me pontificating on about them. But I'm afraid this evening you are going to have to listen to me pontificating on about them. So we have various different wines here, but we're going to, where is Mary, my assistant? we'll start pouring the first one. This one here. The classic glue wine that you're going to taste now is a Beaujolais. And Beaujolais, people of a certain vintage, I think you're all far too young, would remember Beaujolais Nouveau. Beaujolais Nouveau was this horrible thing inflicted on us back in the 70s and 80s. All completely disappeared now. But Beaujolais is always made from a single grape variety called Gamay. And Gamay is high in acidity, high in fruit, low in alcohol, and low in tannins. So you get this lovely, succulent, easy drinking wine. The one we're going to try is from a guy called Christophe Coquart, and it's called 69. Before any of you start thinking anything, it's because he was born in 1969, and that's why he calls it 69. So you have with Beaujolais sort of three levels. The basic level is Beaujolais, the next level up is Beaujolais Village, and then the posh level, they have about 8-10 different towns, like Fleury, like Morgon, like Moulin-à-Vent, that you will pay 20-25 euros a bottle for. We're going in at the base level, so this is just basic Beaujolais, which I absolutely adore. It's the kind of wine that makes you wish you were over in France or somewhere warm and sunny with a plate of charcuterie and cheese and pâté and some French baguette and a bottle of this wine sitting in front of you in the hot sun. We've got almost there. There's lots of charcuterie and everything here, but we've no sunshine. Can I have a try of it?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So listen, you're working hard up there.
Thank you.
Is that alright?
Now, have you all got a little dribble of it in front of you? No. Oh, it's only... Sorry, you're... I'll tell you how it tastes. How about that? So... Do you get the coupe of it first of all? It's nice, it's refreshing, it actually makes you want to take another sip of it because you've got this lovely crunchy strawberry, red currant fruit, you've got good acidity to it. I suspect it's the kind of wine, and you could try this on your partner later, is to actually blindfold them and give them a glass of white wine at room temperature or a glass of red wine that's cold, and see if they can actually guess what colour it is. You would be absolutely amazed. Everyone thinks it's obvious. It's not at all obvious. So, do you like your chilled red wine? Yes? Are we on a winner here? Yeah. Well, Beaujolais, if you ever get to go there, and I would, we fly to Lyon, and it's about an hour away. It is one of the most beautiful rolling hillsides, cute little French towns, all of them with little churches and all of them with cafes where you can sit out and have a glass of this, and your partner can drive you around after you've had a couple of glasses of it over lunchtime. Any questions? No? It's all clear. Sorry you can't have any.
What's the price range?
The price is about, he said 16, 17 euro, 15. It was in the Irish Times about 2 weeks ago. I'm surprised you don't remember it. But you could go down, it's from Wine Lab, the people with the wine on tap. They bring it in. And he does a posher level of Beaujolais Village as well. But I think this, actually it's 15, 16 euro a bottle. And it's available through independent wine shops. I think it's gorgeous, I think it's fantastic. It's 13% alcohol, so it's not too big. You could drink a bottle yourself without any problem at all. So we're going to move from Beaujolais in France all the way down to the south of Chile, and to one of the most amazing wine regions that I've come across in years. We tend to think of Chile, and we're quite right, of these cheap Cabernets and Sauvignons that you see in the supermarkets. And these all come from vineyards that are these perfectly manicured rows of vines that are all irrigated, so they have water coming in on them, and they're machine harvested. Everything is done mechanically, and that is how Chilean wine can be very cheap. But if you go about a 4-hour drive southwards, you come to an area called Iveagh. And Iveagh was one of the most amazing regions I've visited. It was the first place that the Spanish missionaries arrived. And the missionaries came, first of all, to the Canaries. Then the first place they landed was Mexico and Peru. Then they went down to Argentina. And then they went over to Chile. And the first thing that missionaries need is sacramental wine. So you can bring wine with you, but it's much easier to bring the vines with you. So they bought this vine, which variously is called País when it's in Chile. In Argentina and Peru, it's called Criolla Chica. And in California, when it arrived 100 or so years later, it's called the Mission Grape. Now, all of these are one and the same grape. They wouldn't, if you look at any book about Argentine wine or Chilean wine, they won't mention it, but it was until very recently the most widely planted grape in both Argentina and Chile. In Peru, they use it to make pisco, which is a spirit that they distill out of grapes. It's never going to be the world's greatest wine. It's what I talked about, the glue glue wine. The guy who made this wine said to me it's a simple vin de soif. The guy who makes it, whose name is Leonardo Irazzo, I think is one of the coming winemakers. I actually met him in Argentina, and I was just talking to him and said, "Where did you learn winemaking?" And he said, "I learned it in Chile." And I said, "Where did you learn it in Chile?" He said, "Well, I come from Iveagh." And I said, "I've just been to Iveagh. Can we get your wine in Ireland?" And he said, "Yeah, there's this French guy, Pascal, who's right over there." He said he brings it in. So I tasted it, and it's called Volcanico. Over there, down in Iveagh, there is no training of vines whatsoever. It almost looks like a big lawn because all of the shoots of the vines just flop all over the ground. The vines go back 60, 80, 100, 120 years. And this was known until recently as the cheapo area of Chile, where if you wanted jug wine that you couldn't bother exporting, all came from here. So what he's done with this is whole bunch wine. He basically puts whole bunches of grapes, jumps up and down in them for a few minutes, and just lets the wine do its thing. He adds no yeast, no nothing. It's in cement tanks. If you ever want to show off to your wine anorak friends, tell them you tasted a whole bunch wine. And what it does is it gives this sort of stemmy freshness, I hope. Have I got any yet? No. I better check it has it before I... No, I tasted it. The first thing you notice with this very pale colour, País doesn't have very thick skin, so you get pale colour. The other thing is when you do whole bunch, it tends to leach some of the colour out of it. What it does do is gives a sort of grippy freshness. It's almost like a slight stalkiness that you get to it. But this definitely, going back to my thing, should be served cold. And when I say cold, don't put it in buckets of ice for ages. Just serve it, put it in the fridge for half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, and it'll come out around 14%. Do you like it? You get that grippiness that I was talking about. Lightness, it's 12.5% alcohol. And that again is the sort of wine that you could have with the same pâté and cheese. I'm going on a lot about pâté and cheese. It's one of my favorites. Hands up who likes it. Yeah. Hands up who didn't like it, really didn't like it. Okay, that's fine. I don't take it personally. Just don't tell Pascal over in latitude 50 something where he is. But the other thing that you get from that, they call it volcanic País because it's grown on granite soil, which gives this liveliness, this freshness on top of the whole bunch fermentation. Now, The next thing, you're going to have to concentrate on this bit, because we're going to serve the same wine twice. One at the lower temperature and one at the higher temperature. So you can decide yourself which wine you prefer. So, which wine are we serving first? The warm one, Mary? I can't hear a word you're saying.
In the paper cup and the cold
Okay,
glass.
so the warmer one is in the paper cup, the colder one is in the glass. And the point of this was really to show the difference that it can make to a wine. So I hope it worked. We put the chilled one in ice. Somebody's been sitting on the other one for the whole day to warm it up a bit. And this is made from a third grape variety that goes really well when you chill it. I wrote an article recently because going back to one of the first times I was in France, I was sitting in a wine bar when I got some of the charcuterie I was talking about, and bread and cheese, and they served me this chilled Cabernet Franc. Now, Cabernet Franc is sort of not the poor cousin, but it's almost the bridesmaid, never the bride, compared to Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon has gone around the world. Everyone says it's one of the world's great grape varieties. Cabernet Franc can actually make wine, as far as I'm concerned, every bit as good. It just doesn't get the credit for it. Down in Bordeaux, on the left bank, which is where all the Chateau Mouton Rothschild and Lafite are, it will be mainly Cabernet Sauvignon with a bit of Cabernet Franc. But when you go over to Saint-Emilion, which is on the right bank, they had difficulty ripening Cabernet Sauvignon. So what they do is plant Cabernet Franc. So you get this wine that's not as tannic, it's a bit lighter, it's a little bit fresher. And some of the top chateaux like Cheval Blanc, Chateau Ozone are made 50-60% from Cabernet Franc. But the area that it really comes into its own is up in the Loire Valley. So if you go to areas like Saumur, Champagny, Bourgogne, Anjou, you find wines that are about 12.5% alcohol, that are 100% Cabernet Franc, and they are just made to be drunk chilled, he said he hoped, when you get to taste all the wines. This wine is, I don't know if it's a biodynamically made wine or from biodynamic grapes. It's made with very low sulfur, so it's quite a natural style of wine, but made from one of the best exponents of natural wine that I've come across. So it's the same wine, room temperature in paper cup, chilled in the glass. Okay, I actually think somewhere in between the two would be perfect. So you could try blending the two together when you finish up. I think the chilled one is a little bit too chilled, but you see exactly what I mean about the tannins. That the chilled wine gets very dry, quite tannic. The other one is much rounder and fruitier, but I think a little bit hot. But I suspect, as the final thing, mix the two together and you'll have the perfect wine. I think that works perfectly. I think the blend of the two. Okay, well I hope you enjoyed the tasting. It was just a quick tasting, but it is. Please, the next time you go into a restaurant and they serve you really warm wine. When I was growing up, restaurants that my parents brought me to would put red wine by the fire, which just baked one half of it and the other half was still chilled. If you do want to warm a wine, you can use the microwave actually, but take the capsule off. But it's very hard to get back once you've gone too hot. The easiest way is to run a sink of water at blood temperature. And blood temperature means when you put your fingers into it, you can't feel anything. Put the wine in a plastic bag, put it in that for 2 minutes, and you've got it at perfect room temperature. But by room temperature, I mean Victorian room temperature, and not this horrible alcoholic soupy rubbish that they serve in so many places. Anyway, thank you for being so attentive. Hope you enjoyed the evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for appearing on the podcast. Great listening back to the talk and some of the banter in among the information that you were sharing. Do please see below for John's website and social media handles. As we reach the end of this series, it's only left for me to say a huge thank you to everyone who's appeared in this series, which has run between episodes 289 and 300 on the podcast. So do please go back and check out any episodes that you might have missed. And of course, if you know anybody who lives in Dublin or is going to be in Dublin who may not have heard about this podcast, do please tell them to give the Interpreting Wine podcast a listen. And if you've enjoyed this series and you haven't already, then why not hop onto iTunes and leave me a review? And as ever, I'd love to have your feedback. You can reach me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, or shoot me an email, hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.